Just to give you a bit of background on myself, for the last 15 or 20 years I've been working as an applied sports scientist in the real world on a day-to-day basis, working with coaches and athletes. So this presentation, when to think and when to blink, is a little bit of a philosophical presentation that just a whole heap of ideas that I've pulled together based on that experience. If you have read the abstract, the obvious question should be, what is chicken sexing and what does it have to do with football? The answer is it has nothing to do with football, but it has absolutely everything to do with football. So during this talk, we'll sort of talk a little bit about chicken sexing, but some of my experiences from a sports science perspective and how sports science interacts with coaches in a high-performance environment. So throughout the talk, as an overview, I'll talk about some of the science, the sports science that's being performed in rugby league, leading on to neural networks and how they can be used in a high-performance sporting setting, and then talk about this concept of expert intuition, which leads me to chicken sexing. The poultry industry is a massive industry worldwide. Okay, so chickens, it's a massive industry. Probably we've had chicken since we've been here, but the idea with chicken sexing is if you can identify the sex of a chick very early after it's been born, then you spend less of your resources feeding the non-productive male chick, and you can devote more of your resources to the productive egg-laying female chick. And it just so happens that the Japanese are better at identifying the sex of chickens earlier after the chicken has been born than any other nation. Okay? I'd just like you to hold on to that point because we'll revisit it later in the talk. Okay, so if we look at some of the science that's been introduced into rugby league, there is some really good science being done. If we look at some of the practical work that's being done, this is a scientific approach to defending a player at a judiciary appearance. This player in the white was charged with a careless high tackle. In this tackle, his shoulder made contact with this player's nose, breaking his nose. If found guilty at the judiciary, he would have missed at least one match, but possibly more. And to make things worse, this club had not won at the judiciary for 14 years. So using a scientific approach, we were able to argue that this contact was neither deliberate or avoidable. So from a practical point of view, sports science was able to make a really positive contribution in a practical way in this judiciary case. If we look a little at some of the other work that's being done, we can look at GPS data. And there's a lot of work being done in that area now, GPS and accelerometer data. We can monitor training loads, so we can periodise our training quite well. We can look at training load and injury relationships and look at intensity and load and how that changes over the course of a season. We can use perceptual tests, decision-making tests, game-specific anticipation tests. And what you can see here is a game-specific anticipation test. We've tested experts, intermediate and novice level athletes, and we see an expertise effect, an expert-novice difference in the ability to recognise, read and react to game-specific cues. Sports science also makes some really positive contributions in game analysis, and we're also able to analyse game-based activities and changes in rules during games. So this is skill involvements. We can also look at physical involvements in game-based activities and how differences in games change the amount of physical and skill involvement. And as a final thing, we also make some positive contributions in skill acquisition. So we're able to now, there's testing methods available to identify the attentional demands of a skill, how much attention a player needs to devote to a skill in order to successfully complete the task. And we're able to identify players who are more or less automated, so we can structure our training on an individual basis. So these are just really practical approaches in a real-world context where sports science can make a contribution. This is a little sports science matrix, if you like, that I've come up with based on best practice and innovation. As the sports scientist in a club, you're often the last line of defence. People want to sell you everything. They have a lot of technologies out there, new technologies that claim to improve recovery, improve performance, win you a premiership. So sports scientists have to quickly evaluate all of this information and work out whether it's going to be effective or not. When I first started working in rugby league, there was a thing called the magic sponge, and I'm sure it transfers across to other sports, but essentially if a player was injured in a tackle and was lying on the ground, the trainer would run out with a sponge full of water, and they would lean over the player, squeeze the water on the thigh or the knee, and magically the player would jump up, run around and complete the rest of the game. The magic sponge, okay? What we could argue there is that essentially it's probably low on best practice and probably low on innovation. About 20 years ago in the Australian Institute and Academy of Sport system, sports scientists introduced physical testing, so testing of physical qualities but in the field. And this was quite innovative at the time because it took testing that was commonly done in the lab out into the field. Now we would look at it as something that's probably best practice. Most of us do some sort of testing in the field to identify the factors that are limiting performance, but also to determine whether players are actually improving in response to some sort of intervention. If we go down to this right-hand corner, we have calf blood injections, bovine serum injections, and the idea behind bovine serum injections is to enhance the rate of recovery. It's introduced by, it's based on the Müller-Wülfrath regime in Germany, which essentially involves a large number of needles injected into the muscle, and the injections contain calf blood. Very innovative, but what we know about it, Müller-Wülfrath will state this himself, he knows that it works, but he also states that he has very little evidence as to why it works or how it works. So we'd say that it's a very innovative technique, but at the moment we can't really consider it best practice. And this is where I try and focus a lot of my work. Some people see sports scientists as the service providers, and then on the other end of the extreme, some people see people sitting in a lab or in a university and they come in and do a little bit of work with teams as the researchers. I don't see servicing and research as two mutually exclusive terms or two different concepts. I see them sitting on a servicing research continuum. When we're providing a service, as sports scientists, we should be trying to answer a question. So any service we provide should have some sort of conceptual involvement. If it has conceptual involvement, we're trying to answer a question, then it's research. But equally, the research that we do has to come back and feed back to influence the servicing that we provide. So they sit on a continuum. We can now measure a lot of different things in the football codes. A lot of the football codes are starting to do genetic testing. So we can identify different genes that are important for the expression of speed and power and also endurance.